Hello, everyone. I hope your week is going well. Hope you're doing well also. The purpose of this video lecture is to talk about the GRIT essay and to talk a little bit about some tips and strategies and techniques that might help you as you focus on and kind of narrow down on writing about the GRIT essay using the three theorists that we've been talking about, Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck, and Daniel Pink. Before we get to that, I just wanted to step back for a moment and talk a little bit about where we've been so far and points of view and things to keep in mind as you start thinking about your essay more from a big picture perspective. Keep in mind, when we look at and we talk about academic writing, there's really two main ways we write academic essays. One is the first person point of view. The other is sort of the third person kind of omniscient point of view. So if you think back to what we've done so far in our class this semester with our essays, we started off the semester with a narrative, this I believe. We did some narrative writing with our second book, with our commonplace book, the John Green book. And now we're moving into third person point of view, which is kind of this omniscient perspective, omniscient point of view with regards to writing about grit. So when we talk about first person point of view in academic writing, what we're talking about is using ourselves and sort of inserting ourselves into the writing and into the conversation that we're having within the essay. So if you think about the first two essays that we did, there was a lot of I think, I feel, I believe, I remember, et cetera, et cetera. Those are techniques characteristic of sort of that first person academic writing. What we're doing here with the grit essay is we're kind of writing from this third person omniscient point of view, sort of looking at the essay and talking about it in broad terms and making some conclusions, assertions, and having a discussion about grit as it pertains to those three theorists without having to insert ourselves and without inserting ourselves and our own thoughts and beliefs into the essay. So this essay structurally is not going to have I think, I believe, I felt, I viewed, I witnessed, I read, all of that kind of stuff is going to be taken out. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here in just a second. And one point of view I forgot to mention is second person point of view. I've commented to you all at times on your writing this semester, always avoid second person point of view. That is typically you and using you in your academic and formal writing for a couple of main reasons. Number one, the reader doesn't know who the you of that subject is. If you say you know what it's like to experience homelessness, for example, the reader doesn't know who that you is that you're talking about. Are you talking about teenagers? Are you talking about adults? Are you talking about senior citizens? What group of people are you specifically talking about? And if I use that same sentence and that same example in a different context, if I say, you know what it's like to experience homelessness, a reader may or may not identify and connect with that sentence because they don't have that frame of reference, or they haven't experienced homelessness either personally or someone in their sphere of influence, their family or friends have not experienced homelessness. So oftentimes the reader's not able to make a connection with that sentence because you are kind of assuming that they understand and you are assuming that they've experienced what it is you're writing about, and they haven't in many cases. And also, the reader just mainly, though, the main issue is the reader just doesn't know who the subject of the sentence is. So always avoid second person. Always think about who is the you of the subject of that sentence. If you say, you know what it's like to experience homelessness, take that out and say, some college students know what it's like to experience homelessness. Some veterans of foreign wars, some Vietnam veterans know what it's like to experience homelessness, or whatever it may be. Give specific detail and specific context to the you that you're talking about. So we're going to look at this idea of grit paragraphs and how to write a grit paragraph. I put a couple of sample grit paragraphs in the module that you can look at. One looking at Carol Dweck and the idea of growth and fixed mindsets. One is also from Angela Duckworth, which is dealing with her ideas and her philosophy on what grit is and why it's important. So let me share my screen with you, and I'm just going to go over another body paragraph and kind of look at it from a large picture perspective or a big picture perspective, and then we'll go inside the paragraph structurally and break it down a little bit more. So let me share my screen with you here. And this is just a sample grit paragraph that I sort of put together on the fly. I looked at those sample paragraphs. Those sample grit paragraphs that were in the module were ones that students had done from previous semesters. Those are paragraphs that are certainly not perfect. They certainly could be improved in some ways, but it gives you just an idea of how to approach these three theorists with regards to their philosophies and their ideas and beliefs on what grit is and why it's important. So given the fact that Duckworth and Dweck are included in those sample paragraphs, I thought I would do a paragraph or show you a paragraph dealing with Daniel Pink. So the first thing that I would suggest you do in writing this essay is write your body paragraphs first. I know in talking with some of you, you do that anyway, but I think it's really, really helpful and important when we're dealing with 3 different kinds of sources from 3 different theorists to write your body paragraphs first and kind of see what ideas, thoughts, comments that you have about grit as it relates to those 3 theorists and their ideas, how that emerges in your body paragraphs. Then look for some of the commonalities and some of the connections that exist and go back and write your introduction and your thesis statement. Sometimes when we write introductions, our thesis statements first, we pigeonhole ourselves in terms of our thinking and our feeling about an essay into that thesis statement. And we feel like we have to do, that was the first thesis statement that came to my mind, and that was the first thing I typed up or wrote down. So by golly, I got to stick to that thesis sentence. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you'll find, in many cases, as you go through the thinking and drafting process, that your thesis statement will change, or you'll realize, you know what, I had this thesis statement in the beginning, but my thinking and my writing took me in a totally different direction. So you can reverse that a little bit and do this backwards and write your body paragraphs first, and then do your introduction and your thesis last. That's just a suggestion. You're certainly welcome to go in order if you'd like, but I think sometimes helping or looking at your body paragraphs and seeing what you've written so far and what you're thinking about so far is helpful and can help with writing the introductory paragraph and thesis statement. So let's look at this sample paragraph. I'm just going to read this aloud first, and then I'll kind of go back through and we'll break this down on a more syntactical level so you can see what's going on and working here. And I wrote this in literally 10 minutes, so it's got all kinds of foibles and probably some incomplete thoughts and things that maybe don't make sense, but that's okay. We're doing this as a learning exercise, and if I had more time to work on this or more time to polish this up, it might be a little bit different. But anyway, so one of the first things that you want to think about also when you structure your essay is how are you going to build on what one theorist says with the other 2 theorists. So that's one of the reasons I also suggested that you write your body paragraphs first. So what I have done here in this paragraph is build upon from Daniel Pink's research and his theories about grit, built upon what comes first from the Duckworth and Dweck paragraphs. So one of the ways to think about this paragraph, and you can certainly do this as we go through this exercise, is pull up those 2 sample paragraphs I put in the module and sort of have them off to the side or have them on another screen, and you can kind of see how this body paragraph that I wrote builds on those first 2 paragraphs that I gave you as samples. And so I wanted to make sure that I did that I built upon some of those ideas that other students had raised in those 2 sample body paragraphs. So let me read this aloud first. It says, psychologist Daniel Pink builds upon Duckworth and Dweck's research by examining individual motivation and more specifically, what drives people to be successful. Pink believes that humans have an inner drive to do what they enjoy, and this is achieved by how motivated people are to get it. The ability to use this drive to accomplish his goals is his view of grit. Pink sees all of us as having 3 drives or motivations. His first motivation, motivation 1.0, deals with biological drives like hunger, thirst, and sex. The second motivation, motivation 2.0, deals with carrots and sticks, Pink 4. In this motivation, Pink believes that people are motivated to perform or accomplish tasks when there is a reward or punishment tied to the activity, Pink 5. His third motivation, motivation 3.0, and where people achieve their highest level of drive and focus, because this is where our true passions and intrinsic motivations occur. This is where we're able to match our talents, interests, and goals and accomplish tasks because we love the work and we believe it is serving a higher purpose. Pink believes to understand motivation, we need to see how and where we can tap into the motivation 3.0 drive so that we can match our passions with the goals and activities that bring us the most pleasure and satisfaction, Pink 5. Okay, so that's the paragraph that I put together. And this is, let's say this is the paragraph I've decided I want to work with. I want to see what I can do, and I want to shape this up and maybe make this better. Well, let's talk a little bit first about what's going on here, what's working and what is kind of evolving or has evolved rather through this paragraph as I was writing it. So the first thing I wanted to point out is I have this topic sentence here, as I mentioned, that builds upon the previous two paragraphs that are the sample paragraphs in the module. So I mentioned right off the bat that Pink is building upon Duckworth and Dweck's research, Angela Duckworth and Carol Dweck's research, by examining individual motivation and more specifically what drives people to be successful. So remember, that's kind of what Pink's focus on. His aspect of grit is our ability to maintain and understand grit comes from what motivates us to do what needs to be done, or what motivates us to be our best at whatever it is that we're doing. And so I've built that topic sentence around the previous two paragraphs and the thoughts and ideas that I had from Dweck and Duckworth. So that's one way you could do that. If you wanted to do a Pink paragraph first and then do Duckworth and Dweck second and third, or you wanted to shape that around or shift that around and shape that up differently, you can certainly do that. But you want to have a topic sentence that kind of serves as a transitional sentence that shows Pink is connected and his ideas are connected to Dweck and Duckworth, at the same time while explaining kind of what it is his view of grit comes from and where it comes from. So here's just kind of the second section of this is just kind of an explanation of just broadly speaking, as we move through this paragraph, what's going on here. Pink believes that humans have an inner drive to do what they enjoy, and this is achieved by how motivated people are to get it. The ability to use this drive to accomplish goals is his view of grit. So I've established in that first paragraph, I'm building on, or that in the second sentence in this paragraph, I'm building on what Dweck and Duckworth had said previously, and I'm adding sort of Pink's perspective into it. But I basically say, kind of in this second sentence leading into the third sentence, that what Pink's perspective on it is. So we know what Duckworth thinks about grit and her view of grit. We know what Dweck says about grit with fixed and growth mindsets. Now here's Pink's perspective on it, and that is he believes humans have an inner drive to do what they enjoy, and this is achieved by how people motivated are to get it. And this use of drive is to accomplish goals is how he sees grit. Where did I get that idea and that philosophy? That came from the video that we watched. You remember I put that video in the previous module, which is fantastic about the guy who comes out of the crowd and goes up on the stage, kind of crawls up on the stage to get the burrito. And Pink asks him, how many people have had dinner? Who wants to volunteer to come up here? That's kind of where that came from. That's kind of where that statement came from, because Pink talks about that in the first 15 minutes or so of that video clip. So as we move down through into this next sentence, Pink sees all of us as having these drives or motivations. And then I mentioned what motivation 1.0 is, what motivation 2.0 is. 1.0 deals with the drives that we have. Hunger, we seek out food when we're hungry. We seek out something to drink when we are thirsty. We seek out a romantic partner for that aspect, if we're thinking about sex or some other way to sort of satisfy our romantic interests or our romantic drives. And then he goes on to talk about 2.0, dealing with this concept of carrots and sticks. So we have these internal drives that make us do things and accomplish things. Some people have a motivation, to work hard and to exacerbate themselves for money. So all of those kinds of things fall into that. And the second motivation deals with carrots and sticks. Pink believes that some people, the only way that they are going to maintain grit and maintain motivation is if there is a reward or punishment attached to it. So we think about that as students, right? You turn in an assignment by the deadline, you put forth the effort that you need because you want to make sure you turn that assignment in by the deadline. But more importantly, if you don't, the consequence is you're going to get a 0, and that's going to affect your grade in the class. And so that's an example of that. Now, if you'll notice, I put Pink 4. Where did I get that? I got that from the handout that I sent you, sort of Pink's theories and breakdowns. So that handout actually came from a book that Daniel Pink had written several years ago. I didn't want us to use that book. I didn't want us to have to navigate and manage reading another text for this particular module, a lengthy text like we did with the Common Read. So I just kind of gave you the cliff notes of everything that his book focuses on. So you have that to refer to. So Pink 4 shows I'm citing that information from page 4 of his handout. And I can't remember, honestly, if that's page 4. I think it was page 4, but if you've printed yours off or maybe made the font bigger or done something different to it, other than what was attached in the document or attached as the file, as the Word doc or the PDF doc, maybe it's not on page 4 for you, but thought that was it is page 4. So if I'm wrong on that, sorry, but you get the idea. I want to make sure that I cite this information. This information did not come from me. And so I want to make sure that I indicate it came from Pink's source, page 4. We're not really focusing as heavily on correct MLA and text citations right now. We're going to work on that with our last essay. But if you do have a source with an author and a page number, this is how you do your in-text citation: author's last name and page number. So, do the best you can. Please be sure that you do attribute as best you can information to the theorist if you're pulling it from their video or from their reading or from the handouts that I've given you. You want to acknowledge that this is not your information. This is coming from them. If it's not perfect and not exactly an MLA format, don't worry about it right now. We're going to deal with that a little bit more specifically with our last essay. So then I go into talking a little bit more about that carrots and sticks motivation. In this motivation, Pink believes people are motivated to perform tasks when there is something associated with reward or punishment. Okay. So I've mentioned the biological drive as a motivation. I've mentioned this idea of carrots and sticks. One of the reasons I did not explain more about a biological drive is because things like hunger, thirst, and sex are pretty much self-explanatory. I don't think you have to have a qualifying sentence or two or an explanation to explain that to someone. People know pretty much what hunger, thirst, and those drives are. But when we talk about carrots and sticks, well, we hear that term used sometimes in common language or in common culture, but you need a qualifying or a sentence that explains that. So to carry that back over, if you remember from the Dweck paragraph, that idea of growth and fixed mindsets is defined. That student, I believe, had used a sentence or two to qualify and explain what is a growth mindset, what is a fixed mindset, so that the reader has a sense of what that is. And then I go on to talk about his third motivation, 3.0, in which people in 3.0 is where people achieve their highest level of drive, because this is where our true passions and intrinsic motivations are. And here's another qualifying sentence that kind of explains why that's important. This is where we match our talents, our interests, and our goals to accomplish tasks, because the work we do, we love, and we believe that it is serving some kind of a higher purpose. And so as we move down through this paragraph, I kind of tie together these three motivations and why they're important. Pink believes to understand motivation, we need to see how and where we can tap into motivation 3.0 so that we can match our passions with goals and activities that bring us the most pleasure and the most satisfaction. And I took that from page 5 of the handout notes that I've given you. And so one of the things that I did here, how I structured this paragraph, was I had my topic sentence, I connected it back to what Dweck and Duckworth are acknowledging, that I'm taking Pink's perspective and connecting it back to some of what Dweck and Duckworth talked about with their perspectives on grit in the previous 2 paragraphs. Now I'm kind of explaining what Pink's thesis is, and that we have these motivations, and that these motivations are what help us maintain grit, because motivation 1.0 is your biological drive. Motivation 2.0 is the rewards and punishments involved in what motivates us or what helps us to achieve grit, because we know there's a reward or a consequence. And then 3.0 is where we mesh everything together. 3.0 is where our passion really comes in. This is where we blend our 1.0 motivation. We understand what our 2.0 motivation, we want to get to 3.0. So if we believe, that maintaining grit, it is important, and it is something that, we need to understand in order to be more complete people, but more importantly, to accomplish the goals and desires and dreams we have for ourselves. A lot of it comes from motivation. He believes that all of that starts in motivation, and that our motivation is sometimes influenced by carrots and sticks, but it's mostly influenced by ourselves. It's looking for ways we take those external motivations and internalize them, and then match our passions and talents with that. So that's kind of how I broke this down. Now, I could certainly go on and explain a little bit more, but I wanted to stop here just to give you kind of a template or a breakdown on how to do this. Now, folks, we're doing a small essay, so I know the temptation is to have a paragraph on motivation 1.0, motivation 2.0, motivation 3.0. If you really want to make those your own body paragraphs, I'm okay with that. But, we're not writing a 10-page essay here. So you want to be careful and really focus in. If I was going to go back and revise this paragraph, some of you might be thinking, well, what changes would you make? Maybe I would focus a little bit more, and maybe I would explain a little bit more about how all these motivations come together. I kind of talk a little bit about it here. If I was going to add a little bit more to it, or maybe do some revision work with it, I would explain a little bit more about why that's important, or maybe more clearly articulate how that's connected to grit in a variety of different ways. And so that's one thing I might do in the revision stage, is add a little more. Now, what I'm probably going to have to do if I'm going to do that is I'm going to have to start another paragraph, and I'm going to have to make another paragraph and talk about how all three of these motivations tie together to give us Pink's perspective and his sliver of what helps us establish grit. So that would be one way I would revise and maybe expand upon this a little bit. But I just wanted you to kind of see a structure or a template that you can follow as you're thinking about putting these body paragraphs together. It's just a strategy and a technique. But if you think about, you're connecting your theorists together, if you think about what your topic sentence is, and if you think about what is it from their information, their research, their handouts, their writing, their presentations that you want to focus on, that is a great way to structure a paragraph. And then think about, okay, what is it they said about fixed mindsets, if that's what you're interested in from Dweck, or growth mindsets if you're interested from Dweck, or motivation 3.0 if you're interested in that specifically from Pink. What is it? What is that? First of all, kind of give the reader a sense of what that is, define that, and then explain a little bit about how that reveals grit, how that's connected to this idea of grit, and how it comes together. But one thing I also will mention, notice there's no I think, I feel, I believe. Notice here, everything is taken in sort of this third person academic perspective that I was talking about, this third person sort of hovering over the essay, just explaining this in broad terms. You want to make sure that you take that approach as well. So we don't have any, I think his first motivation is the most important motivation because blah, 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 blah. We're focusing primarily on the theorists and what their work says and how it connects to grit. So I did that kind of for you a little bit here at the end. Pink believes to understand motivation, we need to see how and where we can tap into motivation 3.0, or how others can tap into it, or how everyone can tap into it, or how whomever it is that you want to be. But you do not have to say, I believe Pink, I believe, or I think Pink is correct when he says we need to see how and where I can tap into. No, we're not doing that. So this is taking that third person sort of omniscient or writer perspective, where we're kind of hovering over the big issues of grit and what the theorists have already said about grit, and writing and reflecting upon that. So I just wanted you to see how the style is a little different from the narrative work that we've been doing early on. And I know you've been kind of taking that approach. You took that approach last week with the sample paragraphs that you wrote, and hopefully you if you haven't yet, you'll get some comments and feedback from me on those paragraphs. So you're kind of well on your way probably to shaping this into a good academic essay from sort of that third person perspective, or that third person point of view. But I just wanted to kind of walk you through another way to think about it, another way that you could tackle those issues. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right here. I'm going to wrap up this video lecture. And just a reminder, there is some extra credit associated with this essay. If you want to take a copy of your essay to the Writing Center to work with a Writing Center instructor, you're certainly welcome to do that. Those instructions are in the module. And also, please feel free to reach out to me as you're working on your draft. If you have questions or concerns, or you want to talk to me about what you're thinking, or if you'd like me to look at an outline or a partial draft or a few paragraphs, or if you're having some trouble coming up with the thesis, you're certainly welcome to talk to me about that. I'm happy to do a Zoom chat, happy to chat on email, talk over the phone, see you in person. However you'd like to do that, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. So please feel free, if you have questions or concerns and want some additional feedback, just let me know. Well, that's going to do it for this video lecture. Stay well, and I will talk to you guys again soon.